Um, the murderer, Kyle Rittenhouse, basically had went on Pro News and did an interview with the host Fucker Carlson, and Kyle Rittenhouse insisted that his case has nothing to do with race, but he's wrong. Rittenhouse, who was bullshitted acquitted on charges, even though he should have been guilty, and we know he is. He was bullshittedly acquitted on all charges after shooting two unarmed men and wounding another during the civil unrest that followed in response to the shooting of Jacob Blake at the hands of a white police officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin last summer. Rittenhouse says, "Oh, the case had nothing to do with race. It never had anything to do with race. It had to do with the right to self-defense. You didn't have the right to self-defense. For one, you didn't have the right to claim self-defense because the two people you shot were not armed, so they posed no threat to you. It had everything to do with fucking race." And accepted the Rittenhouse trial had everything to do with race. At the time, Rittenhouse was 17 years old, and he was armed with an illegal AR-15, and had gone to an anti-police brutality protest, flaunting his gun and repeatedly walking past officers who did absolutely nothing to stop him. Protesters in Kenosha had taken to the streets in righteous indignation against the white officers who had shot Blake. For the murderer Rittenhouse, a white teenager, to bring a gun to a Black Lives Matter protest under the pretense of protecting property is an act of both white privilege and white vigilantism. Black people around the country have started asking the question on what would happen if Kyle Rittenhouse had been black. The answer is quite fucking simple. He would not have made it to trial if he was. If a black teenager had arrived at a protest armed with an AR-15, police would not have let him walk past, and they wouldn't have asked if he needed water either. And Tamir Rice deserved the same kind of treatment that Kyle Rittenhouse got. In situations like this, it's hard not to think about Tamir Rice, a then 12-year-old boy in Cleveland, Ohio, who was playing with a toy gun in the park before a white police officer arrived and shot him. It was within moments of getting out of his squad car that Timothy Loman shot the kid. Rice wasn't even given the benefit of the doubt or the assumption of good intent. In fact, no black person in this country is ever given either. The murderer Rittenhouse was allowed to walk through a protest with a firearm. He was allowed to stand at a trial and cry crocodile tears in front of an all-white jury and subsequently white America. He was allowed to claim self-defense even though he wasn't doing self-defense, and to be acquitted of all charges without being labeled a terrorist, which we know he is a terrorist. White privilege is not being seen as a threat or hostile. It's being able to avoid the highest punishment of the law just because of the white crocodile tears and the unwarranted power behind him. An unarmed black teenager can be profiled as being a threat just for walking on the street wearing a hoodie and carrying a can of Arizona tea and a pack of Skittles. We know that was Trayvon Martin. Arabs and Muslim Americans are the victims of xenophobia and are viewed as terrorists because of where they come from. Now, but people like the murderer Rittenhouse are viewed as some sort of hero, which he's not, and are able to walk out of a courtroom with their whole lives ahead of them. It's hard not to think about the Khalif Browders, the Breonna Taylors, the George Floyds, the Trayvon Martins, and the endless list of black people in this country who weren't granted the same privilege. The murderer Kyle Rittenhouse is a product of both the racist justice system and the society that enables it. He is praised by a country that holds favoritism for white vigilantism, and that in itself proves that this case has always been about race and not about self-defense, because it wasn't self-defense. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.